disruptive pattern, in identity, and the internal battle to rebuild their life with purpose and clarity. Yes, it's Chidi Egbujie, business growth and profit advisor for tech business, founder of Virtual Focus Accountant, former TV production and banking professor, Shanant, who has spent years helping founders stop operating blind and start making decisions actually build with. Chidi's turning point was simple and powerful, realizing life is too short and that putting everything into his future was a better investment than staying where it was. Chidi, it's a pleasure and honor having you on the show.
Thanks for having me, Aaron.
Yeah, thank you. So Chidi, you started in TV production, moved into banking with your own advisory practice. What did each of those particular words teach you about business owner?
Well,
What business owner consistently getting wrong?
yeah, no, that's a good question, right? Because if I go back to my TV production days, I started off in the basic finance function. So like your accounts assistant and, so understanding the real core foundations of how businesses work. So where they get money from, what documents, how do you collect the revenue, how do you pay your expenses? I'm working through understanding and doing all my accountancy studies through that process was very insightful to really understand the backbones of a business. Then I moved into financial services, and that's where you kind of take that initial understanding of the fundamentals of a business to then understanding how big corp, how they make decisions, how they use data seamlessly, how they have specific functions that produce insights that senior leaders can then use to make decisions. And then bringing those two learnings into my own practice is then how you understand how to set up financial processes for your clients, or my clients, should I say, but also then how to work with them to then be able to make the key decisions which would take them and their businesses forward.
Amazing. Having those track record of different skills from TV productions, from banking with a whole lot of data on what work and what doesn't, and now getting to apply it to a client. Amazing. So you describe business owner as being head down in operation without strategical thinking around goals.
Yes.
Around goals and plan out. What does that actually look like from the inside, and why is it so hard to see where you are in it?
It's very simple, and it's logical. It easily happens. You start a business, and for a lot of people, when they start a business, before this, they assume that every business owner is ambitious. But when you start to talk to business owners, you realize that some business owners, they just wanted to do something different. They just didn't want to have a boss. So I'm going to do my own thing. I'm going to be in control of my own destiny. And then what then happens is because your aim is just to get your time and be able to be in control of your time. A lot of times what they haven't processed is really what else is required, or what does being a founder actually look like. And so really what happens is then you then create this job, right? So you leave one job and you actually end up with another job, which you take with you on a holiday, which you don't get the kind of remuneration that you're expecting, and you don't get all the benefits that came with it. So that's one side. And then the other side is really just the scale at the enormous task of running a business. And you quickly can get sucked into the operations of doing the business and running a business because you haven't really understood, or you just don't have that level of insight into where you need to go in terms of destination, what it is what I'm trying to achieve in the long run, whether I'm trying to scale my business, whether I'm trying to get to this certain size, because those your destination for a lot of them would require different skill sets, different levels of effort and investment at different stages. So it's really people just trying to help them get unstuck from that head down operational mode that they're in.
Yeah, a whole lot to really get to pick in here, especially when you make the decision between those who created business, right, owing to they already thought it through before getting to starting out, comparing to those who just want to be their own boss, more like instead of running a business, it's no longer a business but solopreneur, and then thinking of it now becoming a job, and the thought of even scaling and the thought of working on structures and operation and everything become cumbersome, and the better way to actually more like what way to go, or what do you need, and every of those particular questions is not yet answered, and yeah, a whole lot. So you said life is too short and investing in the future was the better bet? What were you living, and what made that clarity arrive when it did?
So it's a very good question, because my life, by all accounts, it is fine. I had a job in financial services, doing well. I was earning reasonable salary. I was able to take my nice vacations, drive the car I wanted, my kids happy, everything's good, right? But I guess when you start to, as you kind of get older, and I lost my mom, and then you start to really, it becomes clearer that actually life is short. Life actually is short. We just, like air or water, just squirt it away. Like we've just got abundance and tons of it, and it never ends. But the reality is life is short. And even when you take, let's say someone lives to, I don't know, 70, 80, I'm going down a very, very, very dark, dark triangle here. Even going to those long years, actual years of quality is a lot less, right? So some people, once they get into 70, they start struggling or whatever. You don't even know what's in store for us. But when you think of people in their 50s, people in their 60s, those 40s, those are quality years. And really, we have to be mindful in making the most of those years. So spending it with the people you want to be with, doing what you want to do, challenging yourself, pushing yourself. And so those kind of things that kind of led me to then consider life outside of a bank.
Amazing, and a very lovely way of looking at it. Being that I hear stories of more like our parents having to kind of not being there from their kid owing to running around, and and later on realizing that my kid had not grow up, they didn't even recognize me, and the fact that they already missed that particular place out there. And life is investing in the future. It's a better bet. Going into the fact that you're thinking future things and you're putting things in perspective now, other than just living out without having more like a futuristic goals of how the future is going to be. Yeah, it's amazing.
I guess what I was going to say, it's not, when you really delve into this, it's not as straightforward, because you have someone who's out there working and hustling and missing time with their kids. That kid may have a bigger pension or bigger, trust fund. In the future, it's and some people are there for the kids. They go to the supermarket and they have to count what they have to buy, and then they come home and okay, you're there for your kids, but the kid can feel the tension and the stress that the parent is going through, and that. So there's a, it's just trying to find the balance. It's like parenthood. It's not a one line. Some people are good at some things, and some people are bad at the other.
The balance is finding the perfect line. That as much as I'll being ambitious and getting those goals and preparing the fund and everything for them, but still being present is really key. And also you have watched business fail and contributed to transformative turnaround. What is the most common reasons a business that should have survived did it?
The number one will always be cash flow, right? Because cash is the lifeblood of a business. It's like air. If you run out of cash and you can't get more cash, business will go down, right? And when a lot of times when these things are too late, it becomes terminal, because at the point where the business can go or the founder can go and get money, they now can't, because now you're now sitting on this distressed asset, which you can't then use to leverage or kind of get some confidence that the people can lend you money. So that's where cash it's the key one. I mean, there are other areas which would be lack of financial insight or clarity around performance of a business, because sometimes a business at this level, like year on year with the market changing, will eventually get into trouble. But having that visibility, that clarity around where I am and where I need to go, it could mean that there's some steps could be taken to avoid that tragic outcome.
What does the confusion cost in practice?
Well, so the confusion really is the profit and loss, income statement, whatever we want to call them. It's a summary of the trading activity. So this is what this business does. This is how they make money. This is what they spend, and you get to the result, and it's fine. It's as simple. When at the very basic level, that would align with your bank account. So at basic level, you say, okay, this is how much my profit I look at my bank account, ooh, there's the same amount. But what happens is, as businesses start to scale, and what's happening is you have this thing where you just pay when things come in, you pay. When things come in, you pay. When people pay you, you have money.
Yeah.
But then timing starts to shift and there are non-trading activities. So let me deal with the timing first. So the timing is you invoice somebody, they don't pay you on time, right? They don't pay. You've done the job, they pay, maybe sometimes they pay in installments, right? Or you get to the end and that last installment, they can't afford it. They haven't paid you. But then at the same time, whilst that's happening, all your costs, your salaries, everything is going out straight every month. And so you have this mismatch between the money coming in and the expenses going out. So then you could run into difficulty. Then the other side is when you have non-income statement items or purchases. And so like what we're saying is that we talked about your trading is your income statement. It shows how much you've sold, how much you've made and how much you've cost and you've spent. But there will be things like loans or other kind of non-income statement transactions, which when you amalgamate all of them together would hit your cash, your bank account, but it doesn't actually impact your income statement. So you could be sitting in a higher profit, but you have to pay these loans, or you have to pay all these other things off. You have to pay creditors that you owed and all those things before you know you actually that's why you then have that misalignment.
Yeah. So you specialize in UK tax efficiency for tech businesses.
Yes.
What is the most expensive assumption founder make about their tax position, and when do they usually discover they were wrong?
Well, I think there are things around the corporation tax rates. So the actual rates, it varies depending on how much people make. So not being aware of those things. But the key bit, the main gap is just people not really understanding all of the reliefs they can claim. And so they're not really, if they're not getting the right level of advice, leaving money on the table for the tax man. So tax in some ways is not, it's not binary, not just everyone pays this. There are options that you could take to really understand and plan, right? So you need to plan these things. And then what happens is the outcome of planning, doing some things, taking advantage of some things, you end up in a position where your tax bill would be lower compared to if you hadn't done those things.
Yeah, amazing. So just having more like those ideas how that's work would actually make my company to the fact that you could see the various the various laws and regulations that, especially even if you're not there now, having to kind of having that knowing, especially at every point in time, being able to apply it and not leaving anything on table. Big difference compared to those who doesn't know and make it wrong and lost a whole lot of
No, that's right. And that would include not just from an organization perspective or the company, but also the individuals, the directors. So it's now starting to think about, okay, the company aside, so we try and be on top of the tax situation around the company in terms of corporation tax. But from the owner's perspective, what is the most tax efficient way for them to get money out of the business, right? Because it's not like a job where you get paid. You just you can just go and draw all the money out. But you earn the money and then you then have to pay yourself, right? So now we're saying, what is the best way for us to take this money out?
Yeah, what's the best way of taking it out without having to spend too much while doing that? Yeah, amazing.
Exactly.
And so you came from a big bank where data processed drove decision. What did that word give you, and what did it lack that led you towards working with entrepreneurs instead?
Well, so the key bit was really being able to have this, so you have this picture where in a big bank, people would walk into a room and back in days when there's a lot of printing, people would walk into a room and they would have documents of data that's been put together and you would pass to the senior manager and they would be able to read this and that gives them the insight to be able to make decisions. Then decisions or conversations will come through on this information and then decisions will come at the back of that, right? So, and that data needs for it to make sense. Like when you're comparing month on month or quarter on quarter or year on year, it has to make sense. So you have to have processes that will make sure everything is done in the same way. Otherwise, the comparisons make no sense, right? So you have that scenario or the approach, right? to making decisions. And then he's now, I guess the gaps would be sometimes in a big firm, even though those decisions are key, they may be not moving the needle in terms of how much money the bank is making, unless you're in a revenue generating area. But whereas you could be applying the same principles, but the end result is you're changing someone's life. The end result is they're able to take more money and they're able to put that in a pension, and the government is able to top up that pension, and that's more money for them and their kids in the future. And that's really the exciting part.
Oh, amazing, amazing, lovely. Thank you for sharing. And I think they just speak volumes to when you are in the more like in the bank, it's a big system where you don't know what decision, how it transpire to the next and what the
Yes.
next get to bring. Compared to when you work with entrepreneurs, you get to see that, yes, very little decisions affect the end of the day towards the latter part of, yeah, it's more like a big system that if you make mistake in here, it's going to castigate to lead it down to the end of the result. Yeah, it's amazing. And also you see that you get great satisfaction guiding business owner towards remarkable growth. What does that satisfaction feel like? And what is it connected to beyond professional outcome?
Well, actually, so I have a lot of friends who are in the medical field, and we would sit down, so they're surgeons and the like, and we'll sit down and we catch up. And initially, I'm in awe of people that, you can change people's lives. It's really inspirational. But then using that same lens, and I'm able to, let's say I prepare a cash flow forecast and I'm able to working with the numbers from the business and the insight from the business owner, we're able to project their cash flow forward, i.e. we're able to look forward and see what the cash expectations or cash usage would be like in the coming months or weeks. And then we're able to find gaps where there would be a shortage. And so then they come up with actual approach to address the shortage. And likewise, if they have a surplus, they're now looking, okay, how can we make the most of this money, right? And so having that kind of approach, it's really satisfying because it's not just about how much cash you have, it's survival. So you're actually contributing towards keeping a business and a business owner alive. Well, not alive for the business owner, but you know what I mean. And then likewise, when you help people, one of the things I talk to people about a lot is destination, which I mentioned earlier, and really helping people get to touch that destination, which sometimes you have to really almost become a coach to try and help extract the destination beyond what they think is possible, and then having to then plan it and work with them to go step by step, quarter on quarter, to moving towards that destination. It is just, you build good friends in form of business owners when you go through that journey with them.
Yeah, amazing, amazing. This is really lovely. Having to kind of work with businesses, or if there is an overflow, let's say much cash is on the floor, you now get to kind of navigate it. What should you put it into? And if there's not much, find a way of navigating that towards sustaining the business and having to know their future plan and everything. Speak volumes to what the projection the business should be making and what they'll be looking forward to. Yeah, amazing. And also
because
you
this
work
is
with
what I'm passionate about, helping business owners like solve problems, right? Which is why sometimes the actual involvement I have, it goes beyond my services, but it's partnerships with financial advisors, with HR, with marketing, just as so I'm invested in their future, if you like. And so I will give my advice and my skills towards empowering them towards their goals. But where I feel that there's a gap and there's a need from a partner, I will bring those people in to also support.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you so much for sharing. And also, you work with both startup and established company. What is the difference in mindset between the founder who is just starting and the one who has been running for years? And which one is harder to shift?
A good question. Because when you have a startup, the key bit there is to understand the level of ambition. As I mentioned earlier, not every business owner is ambitious. And when you have level of ambition, then we have a journey, we have somewhere we need to go, and we need to try and understand the best way to get there and invest in that journey, that effort to get there. Now, difference between more established businesses is they have it's like the plane has taken off, and now what we're doing is helping steer, navigate, and correct as they approach so there's still turbulence when the plane's in the air, but it's just that now we're trying to tweak the data, we're trying to really challenge the margin to try and improve it by percentages here, and all those things bring in return, for the founder, and just minimizing the risk, like we talked about with cash flow.
Yeah, cash
and
flow.
and understanding key performance indicators, how they're performing against their peers in the same industry, or how can we improve some of those key indicators that we're seeing.
Amazing. The level of ambition and the fact that the company that's already running already have more like the direction they're heading forward to. And for those who aren't, there's a whole lot of things to really get to discover.
Yes.
Amazing. So for tech founder who's listening right now and who knows their numbers aren't heady as they should be, but keep avoiding the conversation, what is the first honest move?
I think it's really addressing the elephant in the room, which is that if your numbers are not giving you the insight, if the data from your own business is not contributing towards your decision making, then there's risk that you're carrying that you're not addressing, but also there's potential that you are yet to tap into. And the longer that goes on, it's like a problem that's sitting there waiting. If you don't address it, it will remain, unattended to, right? So, and that's, the risk of that could be terminal, or it could just simply be that you are continuing to work, but you're not achieving the desired results.
Yeah, if the data is not contributing. Yeah, amazing. And also goal setting, KPI, accounting software, task planning. These all sound like basis, but most founders are still not doing them well. What is the single important of those for a growth stage tech or business to get right first?
Yeah, so for tech, especially when you think of SaaS, right? Because it goes beyond, if I just think of SaaS as an example, SaaS will go beyond your margin. So for people that are not quite clear, when you have your revenue and you have your cost to deliver that revenue, then your gap is the difference is the margin. And so it's something that every founder needs to be thinking about. How's my margin and how can I improve it, right? But when you look at a tech business, like a SaaS business, as an example, it would go beyond just that raw revenue, less cost of sales or less expenses, because now you're starting to look at like, what's my churn? Like how quickly am I losing subscriptions? Because that level of, so it's taking your revenue deep inside of your revenue, how, what's my monthly recurring revenue versus annual? What's my churn? What's my cost of acquisition? And just really doing deep analysis into those kind of metrics would help you take action, sometimes in advance of, before problems even come up, right?
Yeah, amazing. What's my revenue? What am I expecting at the end of the month? That my annual revenue. I think those things are really key in terms of either through more like when you want to invest, when you are bringing talent and a whole lot of other stuff too. Yes, it's very, very key. Didn't know whether to sustain it or whether it would.
Exactly, because if you imagine like a subscription business where you're making money, but actually when you look at your churn, which is the customers that unsubscribe, your churn rate for revenue that you're making, so you're scaling, but your churn percentage is growing. Right. So without looking at that and comparing that, you feel like you're growing because maybe you're throwing more at marketing, but behind there in the system is something wrong because there's something about the product or the service or whatever it is that is meaning that customers are dropping off in a higher percentage. And so having that level of insight would mean that, okay, we need to address this. Why is that? And that initial solution that you come up with to address that problem could be a long-term saver for you.
Yeah, amazing. Now, so lastly, for someone now who has been putting their future last or pouring everything into the business without a plan of what comes back to them, what do you want them to hear?
So who pouring everything in the business without an actual plan? Yeah. So what I want someone like that to think about is, and I'm going to end with an example, which is a client I spoke to, and when we had our first conversation, it was really centered around the where is this going? What do you really want out of this? Not just what you think you can achieve, but actually, if you could just no risk of failure. What do you want? And then he just came out with it, and it's money, it was time, and then we then compared his current trajectory to say, do you think you can achieve this money and this time doing exactly what you do now? And the answer was no. And so from there, he's starting to come, not just me, he's starting to come up with solutions, things he can change. And now this business owner is living a different life. It's not to say it's easy, because a lot of times to transition from where you are and start moving towards where you want to get to would require additional investment, maybe even more time, maybe even more sleepless nights, because you might have to fund it. You might have to take on additional staff, which you didn't want to. You might have to spend money on marketing or ads to kind of start to push towards that level. But the reality is that that's what it takes to get what you want to get.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Chidi. This has really been an amazing conversation. And thank you for sharing your hearts on Quit to Win.
No, thanks.
So
Thanks
for
for
my
having me.
audience who would love to reach out to you, either for consulting, for coaching sections, how to reach out and connect with you, how can they reach out to you, and where's the best platform?
Yeah, so a couple of places. So LinkedIn predominantly, Chidi @Egbujie at LinkedIn. So in LinkedIn, Chidi Egbujie, actually, not Chidi @Egbujie, Chidi Egbujie on LinkedIn. And I've also got an Instagram account, Finance with Chidi, or alternatively, virtualfocusaccountants.com.
Yeah, thank you so much, Chidi. And you're reminded that putting everything into your future is not a luxury, but
Yes.
a decision. And that cash flow and strategy are not extras. Is one every part that's meant to hear. My audience will love to reach out. Just check the show notes and you see the link to easily reach out. Yeah, remember that life is too short to keep operating without a plan of what comes back to you. Once again, the pleasure and honor having you on the show, Chidi.
Great conversation. Thanks for having me.